What happened at Newtown shocks our nation. We will never forget where we were or how we reacted when we learned that 20 very young children or 6 adults were killed that day. Or if we forgot about that specific instance, you don't forget about all the tragedies that have happened recently. As a grandfather and great-grandfather, I cannot imagine how anyone would commit an evil act like that. And I cannot ever begin to know what it would be like to be a relative of one of those slain children. We pray for the families who continue to mourn the loss of loved ones. We pray for all victims of violence and guns, by guns and otherwise. Clearly, violent crimes and those who commit them are a plague on our society, one that has been with us for far too long. We have looked at these issues before, but I welcome this renewed discussion. I think the need for the Judiciary Committee to hold hearings after Newtown is very clear. All over America, people were appalled by what happened to those vulnerable and precious victims. And we all want to examine sensible actions that could reduce the likelihood of future crimes. And we've extended a special welcome to former Congresswoman Giffords. She was doing what a conscientious representative should do, what I hope all of us do, taking the pulse of constituents to represent them in Congress. She was representing the people of her congressional district when a gunman opened fire. The shooting was a horrible tragedy. But her determination to overcome her injuries, progress through rehabilitation, and continued contribution to society are an inspiration, or at least should be an inspiration to all of us. I thank her for being here today and with her husband, Captain Kelly. Although Newtown and Tucson are terrible tragedies, the deaths in Newtown should not be used to put forward every gun control measure that's been floating around for years, because the problem is greater than just guns alone, and I think the Chairman's speech indicates that as well. Any serious discussion of the causes of gun violence must include a complex re-examination of mental health as it relates to mass shootings. Society as a whole has changed as well, and that statement's made. It's difficult for me to measure it, but I think you see a lack of civility in American society has grown considerably in the last couple decades. You see it here in the Congress as well, when we are partisan and don't treat each other with the respect that we ought to. There are too many video games that celebrate the mass killing of innocent people, games that, despite attempts at industry self-regulation, find their way into the hands of children. An example, one video game released November 2009, which has sold over 22 million copies in the US and UK, was for foreign distribution because the opening level depicted shooting innocent civilians in an airport security line. This game was specifically cited in a manifesto of the Norway mass shooter as, quote, part of my training simulation, end of quote, for carrying out his attacks. Where is the artistic value of shooting innocent victims? I share Vice President Biden's disbelief of manufacturer denial that these games have no effect on real-world violence. Above all, we should not rush to pass legislation that will not reduce mass killings. Banning guns based on their appearance does not make sense. The 1994 assault weapon ban did not stop Columbine. The Justice Department found the ban ineffective. Scholars have indicated that refining or expanding such legislation will not cut gun violence. I also question the limitation on magazine capacities. Those can be circumvented by carrying multiple guns, as many killers have done. We hear that no one needs to carry larger magazines than those that hunters use to shoot deers, but an attacking criminal, unlike a deer, shoots back. I do think that we may be able to work together to prevent straw purchasers from trafficking in guns. The oversight work that I conducted on illegal Operation Fast and Furious shows that there are some gaps in this area of law that should be closed. Besides legislative proposals, the President recently took 23 executive actions on guns. And without knowing exactly how they're worded, we can't find fault with them, and probably should not find fault with a lot of his actions. Despite this administration's claim to be the most transparent in history, the text of these actions is still not posted on the White House website, only very brief statements about what they do. But all of those executive actions could have been issued 4 years ago, or after the Tucson shooting, or after Aurora. Why only now? One order directs the Center for Disease Control to research causes of gun violence. Contrary to what you may have heard, Congress has never prohibited CDC from researching gun violence. Rather, Congress prevented federal research to, quote, advocate or promote gun control, which some government researchers have been doing under the guise of taxpayer-supported science. Had Congress actually prohibited gun violence research, the President could not legally have directed CDC to conduct that research. I was taken aback when the President cited the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution as sources of government power to restrict gun ownership rights. The Constitution, in fact, creates a limited federal government. It separates powers among branches of the federal government and preserves state power against federal power. The framers believed that these structures would adequately control the government so as to protect individual liberty. But the American people disagreed. They feared that the Constitution gave the federal government so much power that it could be tyrannical and violate individual rights. So the Bill of Rights was added. Each of those rights, including the Second Amendment, was adopted to further limit government power and protect individual rights. President Obama's remarks turned the Constitution on its head. He said, quote, the right to worship freely and safely, that right was denied to Sikhs in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Quote, the right to assemble peacefully, that right was denied shoppers in Clackamas, Oregon, and moviegoers in Aurora, Colorado. That most fundamental set of rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are fundamental rights that were denied to college students at Virginia Tech and high school students at Columbine and elementary school students in Newtown. End of quote. But this is not so. Except for its prohibition on slavery, the Constitution limits only actions of government, not individuals. So, for instance, the right to peacefully assemble protects individual rights to organize, to protest, and seek to change government action. That right is trivialized and mischaracterized as protecting shopping and watching movies. And those constitutional rights are not the source of governmental power to enact legislation as the President suggested. In fact, just the opposite. They were included in the Bill of Rights because throughout history, governments have wanted to shut up those who would criticize government, to suppress unpopular religions, or to disarm people. The President cited constitutional protections of individual rights as the basis for expanding federal power over the lives of private individuals. This is the same President who exceeded his power under the Constitution to appoint recess appointments. So no wonder millions of Americans fear that the President might take executive action and Congress may enact legislation that could lead to tyrannical federal government. So I cannot accept the President's claim that, quote, there will be politicians and special interest lobbyists publicly warning of tyrannical all-out assault on liberty, not because that's true, but because they want to gin up fear, end of quote. This necessarily and understandably leads many citizens to fear that their individual rights will be violated. And that extends well beyond the Second Amendment. It should be a matter of deep concern to all of us. The Constitution for 225 years has established a government that is a servant of the people, not the master. So, Mr. Chairman, as we consider and debate legislation arising from these tragedies, I hope that we will proceed with proper understanding of the relationship that the Constitution establishes between government power and individual liberty, and I hope we will pass those bills that would actually be effective in reducing gun violence. I welcome the witnesses and look forward to this hearing. Thank you very much.